The Steelers made a shocking trade that shakes up the AFC North. We'll talk about the state of the division and where the Ravens stand. We also got some progress on the NFL draft coming to Baltimore. We'll go over those updates. We got some Lamar Jackson off the field updates. Malaki Starks wants to pick off Josh Allen. Gronkowski tells a story about how he was almost a Raven. We're covering a lot in today's episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Shout out to two new members. We got Carlay and Ricky Bear. Appreciate you guys. I'm going live again tonight around 7:30 with Hendo. Also got a special guest lined up for next Thursday. I'm trying to go live at least once a week with you guys, but appreciate all the love you guys have been showing. Let's dive into today's updates. First of all, we got a shakeup in the AFC North. George Pickens has been traded from the Steelers to the Cowboys for a third-round pick and then a late fifth and sixth round pick swap. My first thoughts was they could have got a little bit more for him, but I don't know, whatever. I'm glad that the Steelers are getting worse, and my theory is they are tanking for this year, kind of. I know in football you don't really tank. It's not quite the same as basketball and stuff. You know, you can't really go out there and not try as hard because you'll get injured and it's just not a good look. But I think that they're tanking from a roster construction standpoint because they have a lot of draft picks. They're really stacking draft capital. The draft is in Pittsburgh next year, so I know they kind of want to make a splash, right? You don't want the draft at home when you're a struggling team to not go get maybe your franchise quarterback, right? Because they don't have a quarterback. Right now, we're looking at Will Howard and Mason Rudolph. Even if Aaron Rodgers comes there, which I don't even know if he's going to play, but even if he does go to the Steelers, they just got worse from a weapons standpoint. I mean, they lost Najee Harris in the offseason. He signed with the Chargers, so they're going to roll with Jaylen Warren. I know they just drafted Johnson to the running back. But trading away Pickens hurts that receiving core. They still got DK Metcalf that they traded and extended, so he's their main guy. He's number one. They got Roman Wilson that they just drafted, so the Steelers got some weapons, but I feel like they got worse overall. And the fact that they don't have a quarterback, you know, I know Will Howard and Mason Rudolph are quarterbacks, but they're not going to be good this year. So it looks like the Steelers are trying to have a high draft pick, which I don't think is the worst move for them. You know, being stuck in the middle of the pack and being constantly a fringe playoff team or out in the first round, that's kind of a bad spot to be, especially when you don't have a franchise quarterback. It's not as easy as all right, let's just add a few weapons and we're good to go. They need a quarterback. That's a big deal. That's not easy to find. So their best odds, and it's a very QB-heavy draft next season, their best chance is to have a high draft pick, and they can go get a franchise quarterback. So the draft being in Pittsburgh, them kind of trading away a lot of talent and stacking a lot of draft capital tells me that they're going to make quite a bit of a splash at the draft. The Browns don't have a quarterback either. I know they got a very crowded quarterback room with Deshaun Watson coming off an injury. Who knows when he's going to be ready? They signed Joe Flacco. They got Gabriel that they drafted in the third round, rookie quarterback. They got Shedeur Sanders. They traded for Kenny Pickett. I mean, none of those names to me lead to the Browns being a competitive football team this year. Now, they'll probably be competitive in the division with the Ravens. You know, they always play the division games tough. I'm not saying that we couldn't lose. We lost to Jameis Winston last year on the Browns, but the Browns aren't most likely going to be a dominant team this year. They don't have good quarterback play. The Steelers don't have good quarterback play. So the Ravens are, in my opinion, a clear gap away from the Steelers and the Browns. Now, the Bengals, from an offensive standpoint, are the biggest threat. It's not even close. I mean, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown that they added, that offense is the real deal. We saw that many times last year. We could not stop Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase combination. Our secondary got better, but I don't think I do expect an improvement, but it's not like we're just going to shut down Jamar Chase. Like, this offense is going to score points, especially when they have the threat of T. Higgins also being out there. You know, the Ravens are most likely not going to shut the Bengals offense down. Now, the Bengals defense has a ton of question marks. They had a pretty bad year last year. I don't think that they bring a ton to the table. I don't think that they knocked the draft out of the park, although it's too early to say that for sure. I think the Bengals are the Ravens' main competition in the AFC North, but they're not as well-rounded. You know, the Ravens have a ridiculous offense and a really good defense. The Ravens' first half of the season last year, their secondary wasn't playing as well, so I know the Bengals kind of torched us on a few games, but our secondary started playing really, really well the last half of the season. So I really think with those secondary changes, drafting Malaki Starks, getting some pass rush juice, and pretty much having all the rest of the guys just continue to get better and ascend, Zach Orr in a second year, I think this Ravens defense is going to get off to a much better start and play a more complete season than they did last year. So the Ravens are a lot more of a well-rounded team than the Bengals. No disrespect to the Bengals. I do expect them to be in the playoffs this year. I'm not underrating Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. That is a ridiculous offense, and there's no doubt about it. So the Bengals are competition, although I am putting the Ravens as the clear front runners again in the AFC North because I think that they're the most complete team in all phases of the game. And speaking of the draft in Pittsburgh, we got some draft updates on the draft coming to Baltimore. So we heard from Sashi Brown a few months ago. He said that the Ravens are really trying to talk with the NFL and the city of Baltimore to bring the NFL draft there soon. We know the draft's in Pittsburgh next year. They just announced that the following year, in 2027, the draft is going to be in D.C. But a report just came out yesterday that Baltimore is expecting to have the draft between 2029 and 2031. So one of those years, the city of Baltimore should be hosting the NFL draft, which would be absolutely insane. I'm excited that it's even coming close. You know, being in Pittsburgh, being in D.C., if you're a local in Maryland, it's not very hard to get to those cities at all. So that's exciting. But to have the NFL draft in Baltimore would be an incredible experience. I would 1,000% be there. I think that that's a once-in-a-lifetime type thing, man. You just don't see that happen very often for the NFL draft to come to your city. And I think it would bring a lot of opportunity to the city, a lot of business, and just excitement, man. Everyone would be pumped to have the NFL draft there, and it would be incredible to sit there and watch the Ravens make their picks in the city of Baltimore. Man, that just gets me excited. I hope that happens in 2029, the earliest possible date that they can get this done. I hope they get this done, and I think that they will. Yesterday, Malaki Starks was on ESPN, and they asked him, which quarterback in the NFL are you most excited to intercept?
What quarterback are you looking forward to picking off the most?
I want to get Josh Allen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to get Josh Allen. I got a few teammates up there.
I think he's going to fit in Baltimore just fine. I don't know if he said that just because he has some teammates over there or if he's kind of showing some love to Baltimore after what happened in the playoffs last year. I don't know, but he's got the Bills fan base going kind of crazy. They think that they are way better than the Ravens. They think Josh Allen is way better than Lamar Jackson, and I just disagree. Although they did win the playoff game, if we don't have 3 turnovers, that is not how that game goes. But it is what it is, man. I don't want to keep bringing up last year. We're on to this year. All I know is the Ravens are plenty good enough to beat the Bills. The Ravens are plenty good enough to go win a Super Bowl. There's not a drop of doubt in my mind that we can go pull that off. And I think Malaki Starks being added to this defense is going to help that, and I think he's a welcomed addition to this defense and the city of Baltimore. I loved his answer to this question. In some smaller news, we got a number change on the Ravens. Sanoussi Kane is now number 21, and there's been a couple solid Ravens secondary players to have worn this number. Chris McAllister comes to mind. Lardarius Webb comes to mind. Mark Ingram wore 21 on offense, but hopefully Sanoussi Kane can continue to develop. I love the way he plays. I mean, his motor is playing like a Raven. He hits like a Raven should hit, And I think that we'll see him continue to be on special teams, no doubt. But as the years go, we might be able to see him come in and, get some minutes on defense. And I think right now he provides solid depth too. We also got Bo Braid. We'll see. I think there's going to be a healthy competition there for safety depth. But I do think the edge goes to Sanoussi Kane. I have him making this team. In some other news, Lamar Jackson's been all over this offseason. He's doing a lot more shows and content than I've ever seen in the past. I mean, we got could have been records in Baltimore episode today with Lamar Jackson and Drewski. We know Lamar Jackson is going on cold as balls with Kevin Hart. They keep teasing that, so there'll be an interview there. Lamar Jackson's acting on the Power Show. Lamar Jackson's getting a ton of opportunities and well-deserved. Honestly, too late. I think Lamar Jackson should have had commercials and all this. I know last year when the Gatorade commercial dropped and Lamar was a part of it, that was a shock. But it shouldn't be, you know what I mean? It's one of the best players in the world. And I think he should have been getting TV opportunities and opportunities to go on various shows early on in his career. But it is what it is, man. Congrats to Lamar. He's out there doing a lot of different things. His face and name is going to be shown everywhere, and it's entertaining for us Ravens fans too to watch him go on all these shows. I'm excited to see these interviews and just see Lamar Jackson, not in a football mindset, and get to know him more off the field because he's kind of a private person. So it's just exciting that he's getting all these opportunities. Congrats, Lamar. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is Gronkowski went on a podcast and talked about how the Ravens were planning to draft him.
The Baltimore Ravens were going to pick me. I think it was a 25th pick that they had in the draft. But then Denver and Josh McDaniels came scooping in and traded with the Baltimore Ravens. The Denver Broncos took Tim Tebow. I just got booted out of the first round. The Ravens have the 43rd pick now. Well, then the New England Patriots got a sniff of it, and they traded up one spot before the Baltimore Ravens at number 42, where I got drafted.
Sometimes it makes me sick to my stomach to hear stories like this because the Ravens, the almost Ravens team is absolutely stacked. I mean, just from free agency and in drafts, and I'm guessing a lot of teams can probably do that. You could always say oh, we were going to draft this guy and he just happened to end up being a Hall of Famer, So I think it just gets mentioned more when that guy becomes great that you were thinking about drafting him. But regardless, it does seem like the Ravens were very, very interested in Rob Gronkowski for obvious reasons, extremely talented player. I do wonder how much different his career would have been in Baltimore with Flacco, though. Not that he wouldn't have been an incredible tight end. He probably would still be definitely the greatest tight end in Ravens franchise history. I think Gronk would have probably surpassed anything that Andrews brought to the table, or Todd Heap or Dennis Pitta. But would Gronk be Gronk? I think Tom Brady played a big role. Their chemistry, their connection together played a big role in that success too. If the Ravens aren't winning all those Super Bowls, Gronk might be putting up a lot of numbers, but he's not looked at as the same type of legacy that he has now because he won all those Super Bowls and had all that success on the Patriots. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about. We'll never know if Gronk would have had the same type of success if the Ravens would have won all those Super Bowls. But regardless, we didn't end up getting him. He went to New England. It worked out really, really well. But definitely an interesting story that he was almost a Raven. That's it for today, guys. Unless some more news comes out, I'm going live tonight around 7:30. So I'll see a lot of you guys there. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And I let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The Flock Rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.